The topic I have chosen is families and social issues. I have chosen this topic because I'm a human development and family studies major. I have an interest on learning about different kinds of family structure. As a teacher, I will have to be culturally aware of all kinds of family structure. Researching current events and applying what I learned from the course has allowed me to view families in a global perspective. One way to understand families is to understand how policies affect families. For instance, most of my current events I had done were focused on China's one-child policy. The one-child policy was for the population control. On the other hand, this policy was not well thought out on how it will affect families and the working age population in the future. Because of this one-child policy, China's population working age has decreased, and it has affected family planning issues. Ma Jiantang, MBS director, explained he expects China's working age population to decrease steadily and gradually over a long period, or at least before 2030. Therefore, China has a limited amount of workers available. I must note that this policy is mainly enforced in urban areas of China. As a result of the one-child policy, China leader is trying to implement a two-child policy to help the economy because there has been a decrease in the population. The economy is a concern because we know that China is the world's second largest economy, and we heavily depend on their products. But if there is not enough workers, then it can create a global issue. Another communist country where their policies have affected families is South Korea. In South Korea, women who are 65 and older have been committing suicide. The numbers of these suicide rates have quadrupled in the recent years, making the country's rate of such a death among the highest in the developed world. This issue has been occurring because of the nation's death among the highest in the developed world. This issue has been occurring because of the nation's runaway economy. Also, the law denies welfare to people who have children that are considered capable of supporting them. Unfortunately, the parents are embarrassed to ask for help from their children or government, but they are exempt if they have proof that their children cannot help them. The parents feel humiliated in asking the children because they feel like they fear or of harming their family's chances of getting ahead. From a sociological perspective, it is safe to assume that most would agree that the population control is a global social issue as countries are developing, for example, economically. According to our textbook, we learned that demographic transition theory proposes that there is a predictable pattern to the population growth as a country develops. Like China, it is not a developed country, but it is developing faster than most countries, and it is known as the world's largest economy. For China, it is easy to apply the demographic transition theory from a sociological perspective, as I analyzed the effects on the one-child policy has on birth rates and working age population. In this policy, we see on the graph that it has changed the pattern to the population growth, and now it is affecting its distributions of limited amount of workers due to low birth rates. Moreover, we see the impact it has ever since the one-child policy has been enacted. As you see, it has not dropped significantly, but that was in 2010. Since then, it has been dropping somewhat drastically, and now this decreased the numbers of working age population. Our textbook gives a good rationale on how to effectively control population, as it explains, as long as they were in balance with similar numbers of births and deaths, the population remains stable. A balance is good to keep in mind for government officials to think of as they try to implement this new two-child policy for population growth. As we look at Malthusian catastrophe, he explains as the population growth drastically increases, there is a food shortage. As a result of this, survival would be harsh. For example, our text explains that population would collapse through catastrophe, wars over food, along with outbreaks of disease and famine. Furthermore, most would agree that increasing death rates is a social issue and an issue of South Korea, as more elderly people are committing suicide because the law denies welfare to people who have children that are considered capable of supporting them. Korean government officials are worried about the runaway economic success as a result of the government officials concerned elderly who are upset about their welfare argue about this social shift, explaining that they themselves helped unleash as they rebuilt the economy from a devastation of Korean War. I believe what Korean government officials failed to realize from a sociological perspective that high numbers of death rates of elderly lowers the life expectancy in a devastating way. This can become a social issue for the population of Korea in the future, because if the birth rate decreases and the life expectancies are low already, this will cause a limited amount of working age population. Overall, we see similarities in both China and Korea with population control. On the other hand, there are some differences between the two. China population is affected by a decrease of birth rates. In Korea, there is an issue with death rates increasing. In China, 40% is aging. So who is going to take care of elderly is a question that should be raised for government officials. Moreover, several parents are happy about this two-child policy, but it does not explain how they would affect the family structure. In China, families, they have a collective view about life and or family life with two children. I wonder will the rigid gender roles in the family structure will change? I wonder what positive and negative impact that the policy will have on families. Child socialization. As families were trying to prepare for their children for the future economy, so socialization families were geared towards this one-child policy. As we look at the effects, how they were preparing their children for the future economy, and that's how they were socializing their children. So I wonder how this two-child policy might change the family structure according to socialization. For example, education was taken seriously as gender gap was not a big gap between men and women. I wonder how families will adjust to the two-child policy with preparing their children for the future economic and generation. Moreover, in Korea, if the life expectancy is not high, then that could be an issue with who will work and put more demands on the younger generation. This is an issue because the country was always a collective society culturally, as it roots from Confucian social construct. The government official fails to ignore the social issues that elderly are supposed to be respected within the family and that children are supposed to care for them, which is called filial piety. Also, it needs to emphasize that this collective view on what is good for Korea is also good for the family as a whole. Moreover, this industrialization and urbanization, yes, it is a social shift, but the government official ignores the fact that the social shift is affecting the younger generation, making them more competitive and individualistic, leaving their elderlies behind. Most importantly, the government has affected the traditional family structure, where it is traditionally the son taking care of the family. It is the idea of patrilineal, and the government has made this difficult for families to continue. This is a social problem because traditional family views are going to have to shift when the families have been accustomed doing this for years, and suicide rates are increasing among elderlies. Furthermore, Korea and China families are facing social issues that has caused structural change to society rather than changes to individuals. As mentioned earlier, it is because of policies that affect families. Most of these people would agree that the policies that are implemented in China and Korea is a radical individualism point of view. We see a good example of individualism with the USSR transition to now what we know as Russia. Before Russia, the USSR provided services such as education, healthcare, and housing. Now Russia does not provide services to access to all of these important resources needed. People now have to pay. The lack of access to resources has created devastation for many Russian families. Many children are being placed in orphanage because the family cannot provide for their basic needs for survival.